will be in this afternoon. So go ahead, Dave.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Whoops. Just I'll start sharing my screen so you get the slide deck, and I'll run through an intro and stuff as part of that. So hang on, lost my mouse pointer. Here we go. So can everyone now see my slides?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm Dave Hall. I'll be doing a presentation called Let the Machines Do the Work. The organizers wanted me to plug the sponsors, but for some reason I couldn't. The title wanted to be an image, so there you go. I've plugged the sponsors, got that out the way. Now we'll talk about me briefly. I'm a Drupal developer. I also hack on Python, Bash, JavaScript, a bunch of other languages, whatever I need to get the job done. I'm also a sysadmin, and I've been trying to automate myself out of a job for many years, but I've been quite unsuccessful at that. But I keep trying. I could go on more about myself, but you probably get bored with that. But just briefly, this is part of my DrupalCon Dublin preparation. I'm doing a round the world trip. So this morning, your time, I was in Chennai, India at a global training day doing a presentation there. And later on today, I'll be doing a presentation at DrupalCamp, St. Louis, Missouri. So yeah, I'm getting a bit of practice in. So any feedback about my session is greatly appreciated. Before I can get into the presentation proper, I need to keep the lawyers happy. So, and I really don't like it when people read word for word off slides, but I'm going to have to do that for this one. This presentation allegedly contains material which the Jim Henson Company, Disney, Sesame Workshop, and others may be able to claim copyright over. These small pieces of alleged materials are used in this non-commercial educational presentation for the purpose of review and/or comic relief. This is protected by fair use and/or dealing provisions under US, Belgian, and European copyright law. Before issuing a DMCA takedown notice or any other claim of copyright infringement, please search for Streisand effect. Now, the one to keep my clients happy. The material used in this presentation may or may not include software, services, and/or methodologies used by my clients. Even if my clients are using such things this very second, they may not continue to do so into the future. My use and/or their use of anything shown in this presentation should be an endorsement. My clients, family, and dog disown any views, opinions, and/or words expressed by me or any other participant in this presentation. If you attempt to implement anything shown during this presentation, you're on your own. Don't sue me. I'm a straw man. So, on to the presentation proper. Today, I will be talking about DevOps, and if we're going to talk about DevOps, I need to include a few things that most DevOps presentations contain. So, Google and DevOps. We know that Google has their single code repository. Everyone has access to it. They have all kinds of automation for deployment. There's also the Google cloud compute platform that you can run your stuff on. They do all kinds of good stuff. Etsy has their Coders Craft and their blog, and it's all fantastic and great, and they do great things. We've got Netflix and their Chaos Monkey, where they can turn things off and see how robust their platform is. You know, pretty cool tool. Facebook, they've got a bunch of things they do around DevOps. You know, at one stage they even tried rewriting. Well, they've actually rewritten PHP a couple of times to make things work better for them. Airbnb, well-known startup, they do DevOps. Throw them in the slide deck just for effect. GitHub, you know, GitHub's got a really good DevOps culture. They blog a bit about their stuff. Their people go give presentations about their DevOps culture. You know, people, you know, look up to GitHub as well for DevOps. The thing with all of these companies, people look at with DevOps and feel like, oh my God, that's just so far from where we're at. A deployment for us happens once a month. It's a manual process and management freaks out. There's always problems. And it can really discourage people from wanting to try to start to automate some things. So it's always good to look at how we can automate things and not get intimidated by the rock stars. Oh yeah, I also need to mention Chef and Puppet. So there we go, got them out the way as well. So let's start off with why we should automate. So I'm sure most of you have heard this quote before: computers don't make mistakes, people do. Or in my experience over years of developing, I think it should be computers don't make mistakes, developers do. Now, Steve McConnell, in his book Code Complete, estimated that in 1,000 lines of code, there was between 10 to 50 defects. And a lot of companies, they get their developers to do their deployments for them. So you're effectively getting the people who are making all the mistakes to use manual processes for deployment. And so then you end up in a situation where deployments are unreliable as well. So I've got a bit of a video here, which I think is quite useful for us understanding why automation can be important. It's a video from the 1970s.
IBM machines can do the work so that people have time to think. Machines should do the work. That's what they're best at. People should do the thinking. That's what they're best at. Machines should work. People should think. Machines should work. People should think. Machines should work. People should think.
So I don't do much work anymore. I'm too busy thinking.
So that video was from the 1970s to promote IBM's word processing systems. The video was produced by Henson Associates, which went on to become the Jim Henson Company. Hence, in my presentation today, you'll see Muppets, you'll see Sesame Street characters, and so on. He also did Fraggle Rock and Dark Crystal and quite a few other cool things. But the point that they make in this video is that if the machines are doing the work, then people have time to think. And developers often are under a lot of pressure to deliver. You know, there's budget constraints, there's clients who've got advertising campaigns booked, and so things need to be live by a certain time and all of that. So if we can automate processes, then that should free up developers to think more about what they're doing with their work. So let's have a bit of a think about an automation that we can implement that's going to make things better for everyone. Let's pick something small. I've chosen a pre-commit hook. And so I think most of us have worked with developers who write trashy code. They don't stick to coding standards. They, just slap it all together. Whereas if we have a pre-commit hook, we can enforce some basic standards to ensure that, we're getting less rubbish in our repositories. So just as this is the type of developer we're trying to avoid having to work with.
Yes, I love trash. Now look at this restless junk. 5 o'clock, it won't work, and then no telephone, a broken umbrella, a rusty trombone, and I am delighted to call them my own. I love them because they're trash.
Okay, so to avoid having Oscar putting his trash in our repo, we can use this pre-commit hook here. It's pretty straightforward. It gets a list of files which are staged to be committed. And first off, we run a PHP lint check over the files, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it just checks that the files will actually compile. And one of the things, like I've worked on quite a few rescue projects or projects where I've supervised developers and reviewed their work. And one of the common things I find with developers is when they hit a Git conflict when they're merging, they will often fix the first conflict, but not the other conflicts. And so you end up with broken code being committed, whereas this checks and should catch that type of stuff. So then if the lint check passes, then we run the PHP code sniffer over the code to make sure that it complies with Drupal coding standards. And the approach here is it doesn't run it over the full repo. So if you've got a repo that is already a bit of a mess, you can slowly start improving it by making it so each file just needs to be updated rather than having to update the repo en masse. So that's why it's only checking the changed files. Now, PHP Code Sniffer has to work on whole files. It doesn't support an option for checking individual, like just the diff for changes. So that's the only drawback there. So I'm sorry for those of you up the back. This isn't a live demo. It's a pre-recorded one, and I found out from my other session that the text can be a little bit small. So I apologize, and please just squint a little and hopefully you can make out what's going on. So here we've got our module. I did it as a Drupal 7 module because it's easier to just create the info and module file and throw together an example. So now what we're going to do is add some code to our demo module. And as you might notice, this doesn't really meet the Drupal coding standards. So now Oscar will try to commit the code. And I've included a few typos in the demo, so it's just like doing a real live demo. Make it feel a bit realistic. So as we can see there, it didn't do the commit and it found a bunch of errors with the code. Now, there's a tool called PHP CBF or PHP Code Beautifier and Formatter, which will fix a bunch of these errors. So the ones with the crosses next to them, it can automatically fix. So the developers don't have to spend an awful lot of time fixing this stuff. We can see here that it's already cleaned up that file a fair bit. Now, when the Oscar goes to commit, there's still some errors that need to be fixed manually. So put the doc block in here. Fix up the function name. I know it's so exciting watching someone live code on a projector, isn't it? So now, for those of you who remember the good old days of Drupal 6 and earlier, you'll recognize the doc block up there. And I've intentionally put a syntax error in this time, so we'll see that the link check is now failing. So we'll fix that up. And then we'll go fix up and we'll try to commit it, but there's still the doc block error, so we'll fix that. And now to make it realistic, I left out the brackets on the end. So we'll go back, put the brackets in, and we'll finally get to commit. There we go. So we've got our commit in now, and a lot of the problems that were found were able to be fixed automatically, and what wasn't was relatively fast and easy for the developer to fix up. So the next thing I'm going to show as an example of what can be done is database sanitization. Now, clients who work in regulated industries generally have some pretty tight restrictions on how they handle customer data. And also, you being in Europe, the European privacy standards are pretty strict as well. So you can't just have random developers, especially offshore developers, just taking snapshots of the production database with all the personal information of customers in that database and running it on their local machines. There's a whole bunch of compliance issues there. So Drush has the SQL sanitize command, which allows us to strip out sensitive information from the database. And so that is actually done via hooks. So there's a handful of built-in rules which gets rid of things like passwords. And if you install the Paranoia module, it goes even further with what gets stripped out. And then you can implement your own hooks. So for example, name fields and things like that, you might want to just change to random values. So then the developers still have a database that is somewhat similar to production, but doesn't contain information that may compromise people's privacy. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to use a chatbot for it. So the bot is sitting there listening for particular commands. it gets the command, it fires a webhook, which then calls a task runner. In this case, we're using iron.io. And it will copy the database to a dedicated environment, run drush SQL sanitize, store a copy of that dump, which in this case will be Amazon S3, and then it will return to chat the one-time download link that's valid for 10 minutes, so the developer can download the database dump when it's done. So here we go. So it's just exclamation mark, name of the environment, name of the site, and then the environment. And so then this will kick off a task in Iron. And so Iron basically hosts Docker images and code and provides webhooks or queues so you can trigger those tasks, and the tasks run and it'll do whatever you ask it to do. And it takes 7 or 8 minutes, and it's so exciting just watching this sit here with the task running. It's, you know, during development, it's one of my absolute highlights of my day, watching the tasks run. All right, so that's enough of Manana, and there we go. It's done. And so now we can click the link, download the database dump, and it takes a few seconds to download it. We can then extract it. And then here we go. We've got the full there. So that way we can provide database dumps to developers in a self-service manner, but in a way that meets privacy requirements in certain industries. So another thing that is always very useful is when trying to debug an environment is knowing when deployments happened. Now, I love New Relic. New Relic is a really good tool. The issue I have with New Relic is that often developers and sysadmins only go into New Relic when there's a problem, and they don't understand what the site normally looks like. They just go in when there's a problem and go, oh, there's high load here, and it seems to be taking a long time to do this and that. Now, if you know your site, how it works and what it looks like in New Relic, then it's a lot easier to understand what's happening. So for example, if there's always a load spike at 3 a.m. each day, maybe it's a batch process that is meant to be an intensive operation. That's why it runs at 3 a.m. But if you don't know that, you may start digging in there as looking for performance issues when it's not going to provide any significant improvement to performance of the site. The other bit with it is whenever there's a deployment, you're likely to see a degradation in performance because your caches get rebuilt and all of that stuff. So what we've got here is just a simple thing that when there's a deployment, it will put a notification into New Relic. So I'll kick off this one. So here's the site here, and we can see that the site title is Quicksilver Demo. This is using Pantheon's built-in hooks for this via Quicksilver. The Pantheon doesn't provide a different, they treat dev different to stage and production. So when we watch this, it's not going to update the title for dev. I've got to figure out how to make that work reliably before Dublin, but so I've made the change to the title. I'm going to push my change. So that change has been pushed. And then we'll refresh it a couple of times before we check documentation and realize that it's never going to work, and then give up. So now I did that manually, so it updated. And then we'll push this change to production. Okay, sorry, through to stage. So we've told it to deploy the changes to stage. And deployment demos are always just so exciting because they're so fast and so much goes on. I'm starting to think about pitching a presentation for Baltimore called Watching Grass Grow, and we can just watch grass grow. Okay, so that's now deployed. Super exciting, there we go. It's updated the title. Now, if we go over here to New Relic, we'll refresh. Down the side, we'll see that there's recent events. And when we refresh it, we'll see that there was another deployment. And we can see that there's our new deployment. And we see that there's the lines here in the chart indicating when the deployment was. And we see lining up with that there's a bit of a load spike. Then we can drill in here and see some more information about the site around the time of those deployments. So we can get a bit more of an understanding of the resource use and things like that. And this is all handled by just implementing the workflow, one for the config import and one for the New Relic deployment notification. So we'll go over here and have a quick look at those. So here it's pretty straightforward, the drush one. It's just config import. This is from the Quicksilver examples. And then here, the key piece here is the New Relic deployment API that we're calling here and just passing it the relevant variables. You know, sending notifications. And if you host on other platforms, whatever tools you use, like Acquia has cloud hooks, Pantheon has, Platform has their automation stuff, or if you're using a CI server, you can add this step in to there. So you're getting those notifications occurring as your deployments happen. Another deployment option is when you have two repos. Now, this is what it looks like. So you have one repo that all of your developers have access to. It's generally GitHub. So then they push the changes to GitHub. They submit a pull request, and the pull request would be targeting a protected branch. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, GitHub has the concept of protected branches, which limits who can actually push to that branch. So you may have a branch, you may have a repo that allows a bunch of developers to push to, but you have a limited list of people who can submit pull requests. I mean, approve pull requests. And also, as part of the protected branches, you can have it set up so the tests must pass on your CI server before before the pull request can be merged. And once that pull request is submitted, the tests run, and if it's successful and the pull request is merged, then it pushes to the other repo. Now, this one, I'm not happy with how I've had this running lately, so I don't have a demo of this one. And if I did demo this one today, then you'd have no incentive to come to my session at DrupalCon Dublin. So I need to hold a couple of things back. So come to my session in Dublin to see that one. One thing I think that's really important is these days with code, we've learnt that we should be making iterative changes and that we should be making small, manageable changes to our code base. But when it comes to building out CI and CD infrastructure, I still see a lot of people thinking that they need to go all out and go for a big bang implementation. So so rather than iterating, it's like, well, we've got to build out having this system and that system and integrations with this and that, and you know, dashboards and all of that, which, yeah, that's fantastic. You know, have that as your end goal, but start with small things like, you know, the pre-commit hook or a server-side check. So every time someone pushes code, you just run the PHP code sniffer test over it, and then start adding automated tests and checking that your tests are passing before a pull request can be merged, and so on. So I really hope that people do adopt the iterative approach to developing this stuff. And I've got another short video of what it looks like when it's all, as you've started building stuff out in an iterative way. So we can see here that this looks very complex, but if you look more closely, you'll see that there's lots of small pieces which all work together in a coordinated way to give you this really impressive system. And so I hope that that is the approach you take when automating your Drupal tooling. And so thank you for today.
It was very strange. It was very weird. Peculiar. It was kind of amusing. Yes, it was rather funny. It was incredibly funny. I loved it. Yeah, there it is.
And if you didn't like my presentation today, I recommend you go watch Meet the Feebles instead. So, have we got any questions?
I'll try to relay them if it's not clear.
Yep.
I don't see any hands. No Muppets either. Well, thank you, Dave. I think it was very useful.
Yeah. Thanks for having.
See you in Dublin.
I hope. Yeah. I hope to see all of you in Dublin, or at least some of you. So, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.